This hour, joined by our political strategist Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker. Good to see both of you. Thanks for joining us. Just on this energy debate, Grahame, to you first. I mean, how would you characterise the internal Liberal mood on a clean energy target at the moment?
Well, look, I think for most of them, they just want to get on with it. It's all right for me sitting in the grandstand watching, but having looked at politics for the last 40 years, the worst possible position is something that just drags on. It means even your mates can't get out there and sell the message because they're not quite sure what the issue is. And to me, I reckon the government's got to accept that the Labor Party's never going to agree with them. The Greens are not going to agree with them. So you might as well make the announcement, accept that there's going to be a fight, and get on with it.
Is it a fight, Grahame, before I come to Bruce, is it a fight that the government can win come the election if it doesn't have a clean energy target that, you know, it was recommended by the Chief Scientist, it was commissioned and so on?
I really do think so, and I think that's where we're heading, is a political fight. And it will all...
What would it boil down to?
It'll all be about price and reliability. And the other one that people keep forgetting is the jobs of miners, the jobs of people in various industries that Bill Shorten, rose to fame on.
When it comes, Bruce, to this whole issue, which has been around for a decade now, it always boils down to the adage, when we're focused on saving the planet, Labor wins. When we're focused on the price of your power bill, the Libs win. So I guess it's about trying to shift the debate onto your turf in that regard. But what do you think? If it's a simple election fight over, Labor wants to subsidise renewables, the Liberals don't. But Labor might have a policy that saves the planet where the Liberals don't. I mean, is that in simple terms what we're going to have an election fought over here?
Well, I think they probably do want to move it on to that space, David. Look, at one stage, in one way, Freudenberg is putting his finger on a problem without saying it, and that is that there are deep divisions inside the Liberal Party over this issue. But I suspect that their polling is probably telling them, look, why don't you try to move this back into an area where people like Tony Abbott have had some success in the past, and see if you can turn it into an argument about the hip pocket and see where you go from there. That's my guess. I think that's really where they're trying to take it, into an argument about the hip pocket nerve.
And Bruce, how do you reckon that fight would go? I mean, you've been involved in so many campaigns, including on this issue.
Yeah.
How do you read the mood at the moment on this? Could Labor win that fight, or the government?
Look, I think it's early days, really. It's gone to sleep for a long, long time, and people have had their eyes very much on the government rather than on the opposition over this issue. And in the past, when the Liberals have made a big noise about it, they've done it from opposition, which is usually the place in which you try to cast doubt about the other side with those sorts of points. But I do think that Labor has to be careful about this, that there is the makings of a campaign there that they need to be very cautious about, and they need to go in there and knock it pretty hard from the outset and make the point and make it constantly that this isn't about trying to save people's hip pockets. It's about trying to save the Liberal government, and it's trying to solve a problem that they've got internally, which is that the Liberals, smaller Liberals inside the party, want a price on carbon, and that the big L Conservative Liberals like Tony Abbott don't. Do you want to go back to Abbott?
Well, and they should probably come back to what Finkel said in his report, and that is that this approach would actually put downward pressure on prices. But anyway, that'll get into a whole technical debate. I'm really keen for both of your thoughts on Nick Xenephon and his move from the federal back to the South Australian Parliament. Big impact on South Australian politics, federal politics as well. But Grahame, to you first, how do you see this one playing out?
Well, he's really upset the wine barrel in South Australia. It came out of left field. What everyone thought would be an orthodox sort of main party fight in South Australia is no more. I know the seat that Senator Xenephon is going to run in Hartley, just along the edge of the range there. He'll go very close to winning it.
He should win it, shouldn't he?
Well, he's got to come second and get the preferences from one of the main parties, presumably the Labor Party, but I don't know. And would he run second? I would have thought so. And then you think, well, how many other people can he drag in? And South Australia's on a bit of a knife edge. I think there's no doubt he's going to determine who governs. And that's the South Australian aspect. Goodness knows what happens now federally when you're trying to negotiate with people. Will Senator Xenephon still be involved? And today he's sort of saying he will be. Well, he doesn't have to listen to me, but my advice would be, hey, Nick, you know, focus on your main game, which is going to be South Australian politics. If you try and be, you know, a foot in both camps, looking after federal negotiations and trying to sort out South Australia at a state level, you'll end up in no man's land, and people are not going to know whether he's focused on the South Australian game, the federal game. His colleagues aren't going to know, and I just can't see that it works.
Bruce, what are your thoughts? I mean, there's a number of aspects to it. That one about what role he continues to play federally, but the impact directly in South Australian politics.
Oh, look, he has really turned everything upside down in South Australia. It's very interesting. And, of course, you know, the target primarily for him, but although not exclusively, has got to be the Liberal Party, because they're on the ascendant path at the moment, and Labor is just hanging on. They've been in government for 15 years. So if he's going to be the real kingmaker, he has to take more seats away from the Liberals than the Labor Party. He can't just be taking seats off Labor, and he won't be trying to do that. I think he'll be trying to take more seats from the Libs than he will from Labor, and then he'll be able to say, well, who wants to work with me? You know, there's another scenario as well, and that is, you know, if he fields a big group of candidates in this election and they all come second, or a large number of them come second, then with a compulsory preferential voting system in South Australia, Labor's going to preference them over the Libs. Libs are going to vote preference Nick Xenephon party over Labor. They could pick up a swag of seats. You know, this idea about sitting on the cross benches and just keeping the bastards honest, I don't necessarily buy that. He could have his eye on the big picture. He could be looking for the Premier's job. Fascinating times.
Well, you can't rule anything out in Australian politics these days. A final one, and this will come along, it may come along, I should stress, before South Australian go to the polls. A by-election in New England. The High Court this week begins hearing the cases of the dual citizenship 7. We don't know which way they'll go, but if there is a by-election required in Barnaby Joyce's seat of New England, how do things look there, Grahame, do you think?
A fairly ugly climate to have a by-election in, but the upside is that it would be Barnaby Joyce as the candidate, and you'd run a campaign that New England really deserves a voice in government. And just so happens it's one of the most powerful voices in the government, Barnaby. And you'd run through his record, like he's even had federal departments shifted to his electorate. You know, nobody else can say that. And then you may well just trot out for a bit of practice the energy debate and paint Labor in a particular corner, which is not going to be terribly helpful for the price of energy.
Yeah, you'd have to settle your own policy to be able to do that, which gets back to your initial point at the start of this conversation. Get on with it and have a policy. Bruce, look, you may in fact be related to a potential candidate in a New England by-election. Tony Windsor, is he going to run, do you think?
You know, I've got no idea whether he's going to run or not. But I think the only person who would have a real show at taking the seat would be Windsor, because he's got his own machine up in New England and he's still got a strong group of supporters. And of course, you know, since he unsuccessfully contested the election at last time around, well, you know, things have only got worse for the government. So if he decided to have a crack at it with Labor preferences, it could be an interesting and long night.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We've got a few bridges to cross, including the High Court, before we get to any by-election. No doubt we'll talk more about this one, Bruce and Grahame. Good to see you both, and we'll catch up next week.